Hey guys, today I have another Polybridge 2 video, and what I wanted to do this time is play off of my claw mechanism, but the reason is because that seemed unsafe. So here's my original bridge for level 211 here, and you can see this guy just seems unsafe. He's over the river, like, he could fall in at any moment, like, he needs to be transported out of there immediately. So what I'm going to have to do is transport him back to the beginning, so that he can go all the way over and all the way back once the bridge is down and safe. So the first thing I did is get rid of this entire bridge. We aren't going to be needing it. It's clearly too unsafe. It would never pass OSHA standards. So the important thing to do here, add a massive steel truss system, because that hasn't failed me yet. Now I'm adding in a diamond hydraulic at the end here. My plan is that it's going to attach to the end of the bridge, as you see here I'm doing with the rope, and it's going to yank the entire bridge up, and it's going to flip the car all the way back to the start. Now here I'm actually struggling a bit because I didn't realize the bike stops at one road after the stop sign. So I add that in here and, well, let's give it a shot. Okay, that wasn't so ideal. Next thing I'm going to do though is try adding the diamond hydraulic to the middle of the bridge. And the plan with this is that it's going to get a bit more leverage on the end of the road, and you see here as the bike gets over. The bike actually moves a reasonable distance, but the hydraulic completely folds in on itself and puts an insane amount of stress on everything, destroys that massive steel truss that I honestly did not think was going to be possible to break. So the first thing I do, just get rid of this old truss system. It's no good. It actually did fail me, but a new truss system, that's a great idea. The idea with this one is that it reaches the other land, so it should be a bit more stable. It's not going to be leaning over the bridge a substantial amount. So I'm just supporting that a bit more now. And what I'm doing is adding supports from the top of the truss to the bridge. The idea here is along the springs, those supports are going to detach and the springs are supposed to yank up the bridge and flip the car over. Now the idea is actually decent, as you'll see later, but I messed it up, and the springs that I compressed should have been stretched, and the springs that should have been stretched were compressed. And this was an issue. As you see, it just pushes out the springs instead of puts them under tension. So I tried a few more times with some other solutions, but unfortunately, because of that mistake I made before, it was going to be impossible for it to work. So I decided to go for a simpler idea here with just 2 springs. And after a bit of fine tuning, I ultimately got this design, which, I mean, like, it moved it, but it was nowhere near where I needed it to be. So I added a second arch on top of my already existing arch with 3 springs attached in series. And the hope was it was going to have more yanking force, which it did, but it was still nowhere near what I needed it to be. So I added in, this time realizing my mistake, a second diamond spring. And with a little bit of fine tuning, I ultimately got this design. And it was way better than before, but even if I moved it up, you see, I'm nowhere near the movement I'm going to need to be at. So what I do is I come back the next day, and I decided to get rid of that entire thing and try for some under supports. But I looked and it didn't have springs. And I was really confused because I could have sworn I was using them yesterday. And looking here, it was clear I did have springs. So I had no clue what caused this, but ultimately it's because I didn't have unlimited material on, which kind of surprised me. I didn't realize it gave you material that you wouldn't have had in the first place. So, whatever, I had them now. So what I was going for was a design to push up the bridge. But I got a bit more movement out of it, but nowhere near what I would need it to be. So ultimately I decided just to get rid of that entire idea of springs because it just wasn't going to work, and I tried for something else. My idea was to make an even bigger steel arch. Well, wasn't the idea, but it ultimately was going to be required for what I wanted to do. Because I wanted to make a swing that carried over, like make a little carriage to carry the bike over to the start. But to do that, I needed a few changes, because now I needed to avoid the planes with the other 2 sections of the bridge. So the next thing I'm working on here is a way to lift up that bridge. And you see I got the hydraulic in the middle already, but I can't just lift it up there. I need some guiding arms in. And you see that's what I'm placing here. And the idea with the guiding arms is that if I don't have them, the bridge can rotate around the point where the hydraulic is pulling it from. Which doesn't work so well because when I need to reattach the bridge to the bottom, it won't line up correctly, and then it's just going to rotate weird. So here what I'm doing is adding in those guiding arms, and I actually messed them up a bit. They needed to be 1 unit to the right and 1 unit up from the bridge in order to function properly. So I'm fixing that, and, well, the support shockingly wasn't strong enough. So I need to fix that a bit. And you see here, this was the final design I got. So it lifts up, avoids both of the planes, and then it gets put back down in exactly the right spot. So now all I had to do is add it to the other side. This actually wasn't as easy as it might seem. I mean, it was like exactly the same idea, but I couldn't just copy and paste because the arch was lopsided because I didn't feel like using the tracing tool. But you see, ultimately I did get it here. And there's a bit more wobble, but it's only because it's hanging over the arch quite a bit more. So now I'm creating the carriage for the bike to get carried back over to the beginning of the level with. So after a bit of lining some stuff up, really it was pretty simple. I just had to do this, but the bike fell off immediately, which meant I needed a new solution. It was going to be a more complicated solution. So now what I wanted to do is make an arm that would pick up the carriage, and it would still be attached to the cable, but would pick it up and move it over to the other side. And this I thought had a bit more promise because it was actually lifting the carriage up and over, and it wasn't relying on any weird swaying motions. The hydraulic could put it back so it could swing back into place once it's done. And ultimately I thought that was going to be a good solution. So here what I'm doing is adding the hydraulic. And the issue with this is that the hydraulic needs to move over the arm far enough so that it swings all the way back to the beginning. But in doing so, it needs to get some awkward angles, and it causes it to break, like, a lot. So you see, like, half the time the arm breaks, and half the time it doesn't move far enough. So it's just kind of a dance between getting it to work, and there I got a really close encounter. So what I tried doing here was adding the hydraulic so it's underneath the arm, so that it's pushing it up instead. And I did get more movement out of this, but the issue is that technically as it rotates to its final position, it's under infinite stress because it's, well, parallel with the arm. So that wasn't going to work. I moved it back, but I added in some muscles, and this allowed me to get more precise movement, and ultimately you see the car is landing where it's supposed to. Now the challenge was getting it to stop, and for the carriage I mean, to stop back where it originally came from. So with some cables, I ultimately got a few really close encounters, and this one actually worked. Shockingly, that actually managed to work. But I realized I could do a little bit better than that. And what I wanted to do with this is create a design that looked less, well, terrible. And something that maybe adhered to the grid points a bit more, looks a bit better. And you see, that's what I'm doing with these bridges on the bottom. They just have to move up and down. And ultimately, I do that with the arm a little bit too. Now, this section is going to be, I'll fast forward of about, I think it was like an hour of footage of just tweaking this, getting it to work again and, well, look prettier this time. So if you don't want to watch this, you can skip to the timestamp on screen now. That'll get you to my final design, but otherwise, enjoy. So yeah, you can see how that new design worked. It was a little bit weirder than the other one. I mean, the drop-off was better, but the way that the swing came back wasn't exactly ideal. It didn't quite latch on, but the car was able to drive over it, and then by the time it came back, it was almost stable in its final position, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, that's it. Make sure to like the video if you like the video. And yeah, until next time.